Hello. So to provide feedback for the grammar items, I thought it would be easier to make a video rather than a written document. So we'll just talk about a selection of the items, talk about what the issues were, and what some good examples would be. So it's not intended to mean anything if an item was selected or not. I just thought they were good examples of issues or good items. Everyone gets feedback in item writing, no matter how experienced they are. It's part of the job, so it's nothing to read into which items have been selected at all. Also, next week you will be getting individualized feedback more when we get into week 3. So I'm not going to be commenting on every single submission, but hopefully the selection that we have represents the issues. So let's begin by talking about the present continuous items. So this was based on a specification for an A1 grammar task targeting present continuous. So let's have a look at some issues that came up. Let's have a look at the first one at the top. I am blank English because it is useful. Studying, student. And this person has actually noted themselves the issue here. They weren't sure whether student would be an acceptable distractor. Yeah, I would edit it because I think this would be a good example of a non-plausible distractor, something that stands out a little bit. Because it's a different word class, it's a noun, whereas we are testing variations of a verb phrase, and we want all our distractors to focus on that. So for that reason, I would edit students. In the bottom, this is an example of not targeting the right exponent. This is focused on simple present. What do you blank for breakfast every morning? Eat, eating, ate. We would need an item focusing on present continuous. So if it is specified the exponent to target, then make sure that that's highlighted, so it can be quite hidden in the specifications. So make sure that you have read that. And also, something else I'll just mention here quickly, this is a question. The item is phrased as a question. Unless you are directed to test question formation, then I think creating an item which uses a question complicates your life unnecessarily, because you're getting into issues, because questions have their own grammar, and you're getting into issues such as auxiliary verbs and do and word order and that kind of thing. So my advice is to make your life easy and just go for a straight. Let's have a look at this one on the top left. I realise as well some of these may have been edited at a later stage as well in accordance with comments, but I just put them in here as they were good examples of things to highlight, of issues that do commonly occur. So this one in the top left, I blank with my parents. Am living, are living, is living. So I think the issue here would be that all variations are in present continuous. So all it is a test of verb agreement. A test taker only needs to recognise that I am is the form of a verb to be that goes with I, and they're there. We haven't really tested knowledge of present continuous, because all our options otherwise have ing forms. So that would require some editing there. Over here on the right, same thing, he blank staying here for this week. Again, this is really a test of verb agreement rather than present continuous. If you notice in the specifications, you were allowed to go up to 3 words. And my advice is really to max out those 3 words, because you can then test all variations of the verb phrase and not just verb agreement. And if you're only using 1-word distractors when you're allowed to use 3, then it's going to be very difficult to target all aspects of the exponent. Okay, bottom right. So yeah, as I mentioned earlier, this is a question. We're getting into issues of question formation here, so we're muddying the waters a bit. Just go for a straightforward affirmative. So, I think what we need to do when we are making grammar items is think a bit like teachers. So if we were teaching present continuous to a class, what would we want to teach our students? So it would be a question of the verb phrase, so the auxiliary verb to be in the case of present continuous, along with correct use of the ing form. Present continuous takes the ing form, it doesn't take the past participle or the infinitive or anything like that. The context of usage, so there's that whole issue surrounding action verbs and state verbs, and only action verbs are typically seen in present continuous. And word order as well. And word order becomes more an issue when we get into negative or interrogative sentences. So that's why, to make our lives easier, just use an affirmative sentence so we're not muddying the waters. So let's have a look at this item then. I am studying English. The distractors being studying and am study. So that option 3 would require some revision because it's a non-plausible, it's a non-grammatical option, so we'd need to edit that. But if we just take out am, then this is moving towards what we would like to see in an MCQ item question testing present continuous. So today I am studying English with distractors studying study. So we're testing whether they recognize it's present continuous. We are testing whether it's targeting that ing form, so the knowledge of the verb phrase, so that we need to use the auxiliary be. We have variations of the main verb, studying and study. So this is heading in the right direction. You might start thinking today I study English, whether in certain contexts you might hear it. I don't know, it might sound a bit outdated. But it's heading in the right direction anyway. Passive items. Okay. So just as with present continuous, we would like to see some variations with the ing form. Similarly, if we're testing passive, we want to see some variations here. So in both of these examples, all of the options are passive options, which becomes an issue because no matter what the test taker selects, they're going to select a passive. So for that reason, we can't say for sure whether that knowledge was based on their knowledge of tense or whether it was based on their knowledge of passive. So we would like to see some variations. So they select a passive example out of a selection, and then we can say with more certainty. So let's think about what knowledge of passive involves then. So again, it's the auxiliary verb, and in the case of a passive, there's many, many variations of what that could be. So some form of a verb to be, was, is, has been, had been, and then correct use of the past participle. And then the context of usage as well, and correct word order. So again, this becomes more of an issue with negative and interrogatives. So again, if you're testing passive, then make your life simple. So here we have 2 examples of items that I think are shaping up quite well. So in option 1, we have I hope the exam results blank soon. And we have 3 variations: will publish, will be published, is published. So we're testing the verb phrase. So we have variations of will be, is. We're testing whether they can distinguish between active and passive. We're testing whether they can distinguish between the correct form of a main verb, that it's passive, that they need past participle. So all of this is being targeted in this item. And similarly, number 2 by 2050, this is also doing the same kind of thing. So we have variations between the main verb, we have variations in the verb phrase. The issue here would be that option 2, the key, has 4 words, whereas in the specifications you were only allowed 3 words. But this would be a very easy fix, because will could become part of the stem, and in fact it would have to, because notice that will is the first option in each one. So anything that you're repeating either at the beginning or the end should become part of the stem, so that everything in your options is targeted, is shaping around various variations that you could have. So that would be quite an easy fix, and again an item that's looking. Okay, let's come on to vocabulary now. So let's begin with the meaning in context item. Jane's parents didn't make any comment in order not to impose her decision about getting married. This, I think, may be problematic. I think the distractors are good, but that's not the issue here in this first one. I think the issue here is that we're getting into grammar knowledge a bit. So if we put impose into the stem in order not to impose her decision, it wouldn't be correct. So you would impose on, I suppose, to impose upon somebody your point of view. So there would be an issue of grammar knowledge there coming in. So we may be able to choose influence based on more on that rather than grammar. So that may be a little bit problematic. After long decisions, I finally managed to persuade Handel, my husband, to take dancing classes together. Yes, I think this is okay. So it's to do with influencing behaviour, and you handle people, you persuade people. So I think this works. Here we have examples of distractors that are probably not close enough in meaning. He will blank home by 10 p.m, arrive, behave. It's quite hard to establish a relationship between them. In number 2, I'm going to blank some water to make some tea. Boil, admire. Again, there's not really a relationship between these 2 words, so they're not really acting as distractors. So that would require some revision. In these 2, I think the first one is a good example. So we have remind and revise as our key and our distractor, and they're both connected with accessing knowledge, knowledge from the past. So remind yourself of something to revise for a test. They're both to do with some kind of mental process, but there's only one possible answer. So you would remind somebody to do something, you wouldn't revise somebody to go to the bank. So that's good. In number 2, this is, I think it's okay, but I think you could also pile tea into a cup if it's loose tea rather than tea that's been brewed. So we could argue that pile is a possible answer, especially if you come from a culture where you're more used to pouring loose tea leaves into a cup or a mug. But I can certainly see the thinking behind it. So you would, logically, you'd think you would pour tea, but maybe pile sugar into the cup. But I think it could be a possible answer nevertheless, so we may need. Okay, vocabulary items, definitions, to finish off. So let's have a look at these two. I think in the first one, the definition here seems a little bit convoluted because you have a variety of different adjectives: better, worse, bigger, smaller. And also, I wonder whether the relationship between exaggerate and predict is strong enough. I think it's probably okay. I can see the relationship between them. So you might exaggerate something in the future or a current situation, and it can be. And also, prediction can be talking about things getting better or worse. So I may revise this by focusing more, by making the definition a bit less convoluted, focusing perhaps on better or worse as an example, and how this is an example of exaggeration, and then put predict in there as a distractor. The second one, to make a small cut on something often done by a cat. So I think what we have here is that I don't think the definition is quite broad enough. So a scratch can be from many things, not just by a cat. And the reason that that has been put in there, that bit about the cat, is to make stroke a more plausible distractor. But by making it a more plausible distractor, you're making the definition a bit. So these are some good examples to finish off. So when somebody does this, they fall down, usually because they are sick or weak. Collapse, cure, there's a definite medical association there, but only one answer. Looking at something for a short time, glance, stare. They are both ways of looking, both things that you do with your eyes, but one is obviously for definition, and one is obviously a distractor. And the same and the bottom, to act in a dishonest way to win a game or competition, cheat, again, the distractor, bully. So I think that's working. So bullying also has that sense of being dishonest, perhaps. So that's working, to look at somebody or something for a long time, stare, glance. So this is was the inverse of the example in the middle. So these are. Okay, so that brings us to the end. So as I said, I'm not going to comment on every single one, but hopefully that gives you a sense of the feedback. And we'll see you in week 3. Thank you.